useless old woman. The phrase echoed in my mind, cutting deeper than any knife. My own son, Michael, the boy I raised with so much love and sacrifice, called me a useless old woman and kicked me out of the house that was once our family home. If you've ever felt the pain of ingratitude and betrayal, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories like mine. My name is Mackenzie. I'm 68 years old, and today should have been the day I finally found peace after the death of my beloved husband, Arthur. Instead, I found cruelty where I least expected it. The living room, once the scene of so many family celebrations, now felt like a cold, impersonal courtroom. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a man with a stern face and glasses perched on his nose, read Arthur's will in a monotone voice. Michael, my 42-year-old son, sat across from me with his wife, Tiffany, by his side. Both wore smug smiles, barely containing their excitement. I knew what they expected: the mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, the fortune Arthur had built with years of hard work at his tech company. And to be honest, I also expected Arthur to have secured my future, as he always promised. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. To my son, Michael Arthur Miller, I bequeath the main property, including the residence and all movable assets contained therein, as well as the entirety of my shares in Miller Tech, valued at, he paused dramatically, $150 million. Michael and Tiffany could barely suppress a triumphant cheer. Michael shot me a scornful look as if to say, I told you he loved me more. My heart sank, not because of the money, but because of the confirmation of what I already feared. Arthur had overlooked me. And to my beloved wife, Mackenzie Grace Miller, the lawyer continued, and a flicker of hope ignited within me. I bequeath the old garage at the back of the property along with its contents. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael and Tiffany burst into laughter. A garage? Seriously, Mom? Dad left you an old abandoned garage? Michael sneered, getting up and walking towards me. You're a useless old woman, Mackenzie. Always have been. And now Dad finally showed what he thinks of you. His words hit me like lightning. I, who had dedicated my life to him, who had worked part-time to ensure he had the best education, who had supported Arthur every step of his journey, was now a useless old woman. Life with Arthur was never easy, but it was always full of love. We met young in a small diner in Ohio, where I worked as a waitress to pay for my studies. He was an ambitious young man, his head full of ideas for the future. I, a dreamer who believed in the power of hard work and family. We married in a simple ceremony, and soon Michael arrived, filling our lives with joy and purpose. Arthur was always focused on his career, building his company from scratch. I, on the other hand, dedicated myself to raising Michael and maintaining our home. I remember the nights Arthur would come home exhausted, smelling of coffee and computer code. I'd cook his favorite dinner, listen to his frustrations, and celebrate his small victories. Michael was my world. I gave up a promising career as an interior designer to be present at every stage of his life. I was the mom who organized the most elaborate birthday parties, who brought snacks to his youth league soccer games, who spent hours helping with his math homework. Arthur always told me, Mackenzie, you are the backbone of this family. Without you, none of this would be possible. When Miller Tech finally took off, our lives changed. The modest house in Ohio gave way to the mansion in Greenwich. Luxury cars replaced our old station wagon, and financial worries became a distant memory. But for me, the real luxury was watching Michael grow up, graduate from engineering school, marry Tiffany, and eventually take a prominent position in Arthur's company. I believed I had fulfilled my mission, that I had raised a grateful son and built a happy home. Arthur, in his later years, always assured me that I would be well taken care of, that my future was secure. You deserve everything, my love, he would say, kissing my forehead. You are the strongest, most dedicated woman I know. But Michael's words, useless old woman, echoed in my head, undoing 40 years of dedication. He pushed me out of the mansion, throwing my suitcases onto the cobblestone driveway. Tiffany watched from the porch with a victorious smile. There's no place for you here, Mackenzie. This is our home now, Michael declared, his voice filled with contempt. Go to your garage. It's all you have. I stood there in the middle of the street, my heart shattered and my dignity wounded. Night was falling, and the Connecticut cold began to bite. I had nowhere to go. The garage, the only thing Arthur had left me. With my suitcases dragging on the ground and a heavy heart, I walked towards the old garage at the back of the property. It was an old wooden structure with peeling paint and a rusty metal door that creaked with every gust of wind. Arthur used it to store tools and some of his older inventions, but it had been abandoned for years, covered in ivy and forgotten. Michael and Tiffany had refused to even look at it, considering it a worthless ruin. For me, at that moment, it was my only refuge. The darkness of the night had already swallowed the garden, and only the faint moonlight illuminated my path. With every step, I felt the weight of humiliation and betrayal. How could Arthur do this to me? How could he leave me at the mercy of such an ungrateful son? Tears streamed down my face, but I refused to cry out loud. I was Mackenzie Miller, and I would survive this. I reached the garage door, which seemed even more imposing and frightening in the gloom. The padlock was rusty, but with a little effort, I managed to open it. The metallic creak echoed in the silence of the night, making me shiver. I pushed the door open, and a wave of cold, dusty air hit me. The smell of mold and old metal filled my nostrils. I turned on my phone's flashlight, and the beam of light revealed a chaotic interior. Dusty boxes piled high to the ceiling, rusty tools hanging on the walls, cobwebs everywhere. It was a forgotten place, a repository of unused memories and objects. Fear began to settle in. What would I do there? How would I survive? Suddenly, the flashlight beam caught something in the darkest corner of the garage. A heavy tarp covered a large rectangular shape. Curious and with a strange feeling that something was calling to me, I approached, my heart pounding in my chest. I pulled back the tarp with trembling hands, and what I saw froze me. It wasn't a pile of old boxes or forgotten tools. It was something Arthur had hidden, something Michael and Tiffany would never imagine. My body paralyzed, and a shiver ran down my spine. There, in the middle of that abandoned garage, was the key to my redemption, or perhaps to an even greater danger. What was under the tarp was not what I expected, but it was infinitely more intriguing. It wasn't an old car or a pile of junk, but a massive steel safe embedded in the concrete floor of the garage. The tarp, carefully folded, seemed to have been placed there to disguise its presence, blending it with the chaotic environment. The safe was large, about 5 feet tall by 3 feet wide, and its metallic surface, though dusty, seemed impenetrable. A digital panel with numeric buttons and a small screen was embedded in the door. My heart, which had previously pounded with fear of the unknown, now pulsed with a mixture of curiosity and a strange sense of purpose. Arthur had always been a man of secrets, but this seemed to be the biggest of all. Why would he hide such a robust safe in an abandoned garage instead of a bank or in his own home? And why would he leave me only this, while Michael inherited a fortune? The questions piled up in my mind, but the answers seemed to be locked inside that metal monolith. I ran my fingers over the digital panel, feeling the coldness of the metal. I tried some important dates, our wedding anniversary, Michael's birthday, my own. Nothing. The screen remained dark, unresponsive. Frustrated, but not defeated, I began to inspect the safe more closely. There was a small inscription engraved on the side, almost imperceptible under the dirt. To Mackenzie, the key is where time stood still. Where time stood still? Arthur's phrases were always enigmatic. Suddenly, my eyes fell on an old wall clock hanging crookedly on one of the wooden beams. It was a pendulum clock that Arthur had inherited from his grandfather and which had always been in the living room of our first home in Ohio. He had kept it there amidst the chaos of the garage. The clock was stopped, its hands pointing to 11:11. Could this be the key? I typed the sequence 11:11 on the safe panel. A soft beep, and the screen lit up, asking for a second password. Arthur, you really enjoyed a good mystery. I looked at the clock again. Where else could time have stood still? The second password. I thought of all the moments Arthur and I shared secrets, all his little quirks. He always said that time stood still when we were together, especially in one place, our small summer cottage in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And there was a sundial in the garden engraved with the date of our first visit, 0704 1975. Could that be the combination? I typed 070475 on the panel. An audible click, and the safe door slowly opened, revealing a surprisingly organized interior illuminated by a small internal light. Inside the safe, there were no piles of money or jewelry. Instead, I found a series of labeled folders, an old laptop, a leather-bound diary, and in the center, a letter addressed to me in Arthur's unmistakable handwriting. My dear Mackenzie, the letter began, if you are reading this, it means you have found my little secret. I knew that you, and only you, would have the insight to unravel my last puzzle. Arthur's words brought me a mix of emotion and relief. He hadn't forgotten me. The letter explained everything. Arthur knew of Michael's excessive ambition and Tiffany's influence. He had realized that if he left the fortune directly to me, Michael would try to manipulate me or push me away to gain control over the assets. I didn't want you to be a useless old woman at the hands of our son, my love, he wrote. I wanted you to have the power to defend yourself, to build your own future without depending on anyone. The safe contained not only detailed financial documents, but also the plans for a new technology that Arthur had secretly developed in the last 5 years of his life. This technology, Mackenzie, the letter continued, is the next revolution in the renewable energy sector. It is worth more than all of Miller Tech. I registered it in your name, and the documents for the patent and the formation of a new company are in this folder. Michael inherited the past. You inherited the future. My eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not of sadness, but of deep gratitude and renewed determination. Arthur had given me not just an inheritance, but a weapon to fight against Michael's ingratitude and Tiffany's scorn, and to prove that I was far from being a useless old woman. The night wore on, but my fatigue had vanished. I was sitting on the garage floor surrounded by Arthur's documents, feeling an energy I hadn't experienced in years. The old laptop, when turned on, revealed 3D prototypes and complex simulations of the new technology. It was a solar and wind energy harvesting system that promised to be 50% more efficient than anything on the market, with a significantly lower production cost. Arthur had worked on it in secret, away from the prying eyes of Miller Tech and especially Michael. The leather-bound diary contained notes on every stage of development, his challenges, his hopes. He had planned every detail, from patent protection to market launch strategy. There was even a list of trusted investor and engineer contacts, people Arthur knew would support me. I trust you, Mackenzie, he wrote on the last page of the diary. You were always the smartest and most resilient of us two. Use this to build something great, something Michael can never take from you. The anger and humiliation I felt earlier began to transform into a cold, calculated determination. Michael and Tiffany had underestimated me, discarded me as a worthless object. They had mocked the useless old woman who inherited a garage, but they didn't know that that garage held the key to an empire. I didn't want Arthur's money for revenge, but to build something of my own, something that would prove my worth and show Michael how wrong he was. My plan began to take shape. First, I would need help. Arthur's contacts would be the starting point. I would need lawyers to protect the patent and experts to refine the prototype. I would not be the weeping widow Michael expected. I would be the businesswoman Arthur knew I could be. The useless old woman was about to show the world what she was capable of. Michael and Tiffany's mansion might be grand, but Mackenzie Miller's garage was about to become the birthplace of a revolution. The first week was a whirlwind of phone calls and meetings. Using Arthur's contact list, I called Dr. Evelyn Reed, a renowned patent attorney in Boston, and Mr. David Chen, a venture capitalist Arthur had mentioned as a visionary with a heart of gold. Both were surprised to hear my voice, but even more so to learn of Arthur's secret project. Arthur was always a genius, Mackenzie, Dr. Reed said, her voice full of admiration. But this technology, this is something that can change the world. With their help, Miller Renewables was born. I rented a small office in Stamford, Connecticut, and hired a team of young engineers and scientists, all passionate about clean energy. They were fascinated by Arthur's prototypes and worked tirelessly to refine the design and prepare for production. I, the useless old woman my son had discarded, was now leading a cutting-edge tech startup. The nights in the garage turned into days of intense work, but I had never felt so alive. Meanwhile, Miller Tech, under Michael's leadership, began to show signs of stagnation. Arthur's company, once a beacon of innovation, was losing ground to more agile competitors. Michael, accustomed to inheriting success, lacked his father's vision and passion. I heard the rumors through Arthur's old colleagues. Miller Tech was losing important contracts, stock values were falling, and Michael was increasingly stressed and irritable. Tiffany, for her part, continued to spend lavishly, oblivious to the storm brewing. One afternoon, as I was reviewing the marketing plans for the launch of Miller Renewables, I saw Michael and Tiffany at a fancy restaurant in Greenwich. They seemed to be arguing, their faces tense. Michael gesticulated furiously, while Tiffany rolled her eyes. They didn't see me, sitting discreetly at a more distant table. The scene gave me a pang of sadness, but also a confirmation. The mansion and the fortune had not brought them the happiness they expected. True wealth, I realized, was not in material possessions, but in the ability to build something meaningful. And I was building a legacy. The launch of Miller Renewables was a resounding success. Arthur's technology, with its efficiency and low cost, was hailed as a game changer in the renewable energy industry. Orders began to pour in, investors flocked, and the company's value soared. In less than a year, Mackenzie Miller's garage became a force to be reckoned with, surpassing the once powerful Miller Tech in market value. News of my success reached Michael and Tiffany in an inevitable and painful way. I remember the day Michael called me. His voice, once full of arrogance, now sounded desperate. "Mom, what's going on? Miller Tech is sinking. No one wants to invest in us. And your company, it's all over the news." I listened in silence, feeling a bitter satisfaction. "Michael," I said, my voice calm and firm, "you called me a useless old woman and kicked me out of your house. I just moved forward with what Arthur left me." The real justice came when Miller Renewables went public. The event was broadcast live, and I, Mackenzie Miller, the useless old woman, was there, ringing the opening bell, surrounded by my team and the investors who believed in me. Michael and Tiffany, on the other hand, watched from home, seeing the woman they despised become a prominent figure in the business world. The mansion they had coveted so much now seemed a burden, with exorbitant maintenance costs and falling value. Miller Tech, unable to compete, was eventually sold to a group of foreign investors for a fraction of its original value. Michael lost most of his fortune and his CEO position. Tiffany, unable to bear the new financial reality, left him. He, who had humiliated and discarded me, now found himself alone without the money and status he so valued. The useless old woman had built an empire from a garage, while the heir to the mansion lost everything. Today, at 70, I am the CEO of Miller Renewables, a company that not only prospers financially, but also makes a difference in the world, promoting clean energy and a more sustainable future. My life is full of purpose and joy. The garage, now renovated and modernized, is my sanctuary, where I keep Arthur's memories and the first sketches of our company. Michael tried to reconnect a few times, but the wounds he inflicted are deep. I have forgiven him, but trust once broken is difficult to rebuild. He is working a modest job trying to get back on his feet. Tiffany, for her part, has disappeared from my life. I don't wish them ill, only that they learn the value of respect and gratitude. The most important lesson I learned is that true legacy is not measured in mansions or fortunes, but in character, resilience, and the ability to love and be loved. Arthur, my dear Arthur, knew this. He gave me the tools to build my own path, to prove my worth, and to show the world that age does not define a person's usefulness. If you, like me, have ever felt underestimated or discarded, remember, life can surprise you with second chances. Sometimes the greatest humiliation can be the catalyst for your greatest victory. Don't give up on yourself. Believe in your worth even when no one else does. And if this story touched your heart, Share it, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel. Who knows, your own garage might be hiding a treasure waiting to be discovered.